Hi, my name is Luca, and I want to talk about my Indigenous creative content pitch. Now, as we've seen in the Mickey Mouse Monopoly and other things, Indigenous representation in media has not always been great. In fact, the majority of times their culture gets misappropriated, and Indigenous characters seem to be based around stereotypes instead of actually focusing on the real Indigenous cultures and identity. Now, one way I thought that'd be really great to really showcase the rich storytelling of the Indigenous people and also some of their traditions and cultures would be to take a traditional Indigenous story and make it into its own movie, like an actual movie. Now, the story I found really interesting is from the Seychelles people in British Columbia, and it's called The Tale of Salmon Boy. In this story, there are the immortal salmon people, who are spirits of the ocean that once a year take their salmon form and come and allow themselves to provide food for the humans. Now, the story is about a young boy who disrespects and dishonors the salmon people and is then taken under the ocean, and instead of anger, they show him kindness and teach him all their secrets. He then grows to become a shaman and is known as the Salmon Boy. I think this story is really great because it shows how connected the indigenous people are to the land, animals, and nature, and how, in the end, kind of the message of the story, in my opinion, is about respect and how we need to take care of nature, and if we do, it'll help take care of us. I think it's also really interesting that something so simple like hunting salmon can have such a deeper meaning behind it and be turned into this really interesting story. It is told in story that once a year the immortal salmon people would come from the ocean and allow themselves to be caught to provide food for humans. The salmon bones are cleaned and placed back into the ocean to respect their sacrifice and allow their spirits to return home. The story of the salmon boy began with a mother and her son. Her son was a rude child. He refused food from his mother, and when he did eat salmon, he would discard their bones carelessly, not allowing their spirits to return home. One day the boy swam far out into the ocean and was taken under by a magic whirlpool. The salmon people brought him back to their home, and instead of anger, taught him to be kind and all their secrets. He grew to become a shaman and the salmon boy. He learned how to take salmon form and would return home to his mother. Upon his arrival, his mother would rejoice, and the two would return to the village, where he would teach them all that he had learned. One day, the salmon boy stood by the water and encountered a fish he recognized as his own soul. He stabbed it with his spear and died. Later, his body would be found by his mother, who would carry it back to the water. She placed his body into the sea, and it would sink, permanently returning his soul to the ocean.